Everyone called me trash, until the blind Omega Consort marked me. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, it is free, and it is the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic and emotional stories like this one. Your support truly means the world to us. Before we begin, tell us in the comments where in the world you are watching from and what time it is where you are right now. We love seeing how far these stories travel and knowing who is joining us today. Now, let's begin today's story. Edit: The stone did not reject you, Caleb Rowan. It rejected what this kingdom taught you to pretend to be. The voice came from behind him just as another wave of quiet laughter moved through the ceremonial hall. Caleb kept his eyes on the ancient silver stone beneath his palm. Nothing. No light. No warmth. No alpha resonance. Around him stood dozens of noble families who had traveled to the royal palace to witness the annual selection ceremony, and every person in the room had just watched Caleb fail the simplest test of recognized alpha strength. Again. Hollow alpha, someone whispered. Another voice answered. More like a trash alpha. Caleb slowly removed his hand from the stone. He had heard worse. At 25, he had spent most of his life as a royal ward without a known family line, without a crest anyone recognized, and without the commanding aura expected from an alpha. The palace had provided him with an education, a room, and enough status to remain close to nobility while never truly belonging among them. Caleb had learned early that humiliation became easier when he refused to perform it for an audience. He turned toward the voice that had spoken first. Adrian Vale stood near the edge of the hall, one hand resting lightly on a polished walking cane. The blind Omega Consort was known throughout the palace for his calm manner and inconvenient intelligence. His pale eyes did not follow Caleb's movement, yet his face remained turned precisely toward him. Lord Vale, Caleb said, I appreciate the defense, but the stone remained dark. I noticed. A nobleman nearby laughed. How? Adrian did not even turn toward him. The room became louder when everyone decided they understood what happened. The laughter stopped. Caleb almost smiled. Adrian approached until only a few feet separated them. Place your hand on the stone again. I have already embarrassed myself once today. Then you have nothing left to lose. Caleb sighed and obeyed. The stone remained dark. There, Caleb said. Evidence. Adrian tilted his head. Yes. Evidence that everyone is asking the wrong question. Which question should they ask? Why does every alpha leave a resonance in the stone except you? Caleb frowned. Because I have none. That is an assumption, not an answer. Adrian stepped closer, listening as though the silence itself contained information. Power always leaves disturbance when it pushes against something. Yours does not push. Caleb stared at him. That sounds suspiciously like a polite way to call me powerless. Kindness without evidence is pity. I am giving you evidence. Adrian raised one hand, but stopped before touching Caleb. May I? The question surprised him more than it should have. Caleb nodded, then remembered Adrian could not see the gesture. Yes. Adrian placed 2 fingers lightly against Caleb's wrist. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then Adrian's expression changed. Interesting. Caleb gave a humorless laugh. That is usually what scholars say immediately before explaining why I am defective. You are not defective. The certainty in Adrian's voice silenced him. Your pulse is steady, but the stone's vibration changes around you. It is not rejecting your presence. It is becoming still. Caleb looked toward the silver stone. Stones do not become still. They are stones. Adrian smiled. And yet you understood what I meant. Before Caleb could answer, a royal attendant announced the next candidate. Caleb withdrew his hand and stepped away. He expected Adrian to return to his place, but the Omega Consort remained beside him. Why do you care? Caleb asked quietly. Everyone here already decided what I am. Adrian rested both hands. Over tea. By the time the ceremony ended, Caleb had learned something almost as uncomfortable as public humiliation. Being noticed could be far more dangerous than being mocked. The silver crown symbol remained on the ceremonial stone for nearly 10 minutes before fading. And during those 10 minutes, every scholar in the hall examined it while pretending not to stare at Caleb. Adrian was the only person who seemed unsurprised. Later that afternoon, Caleb found him in the eastern garden, seated beneath an old maple tree with several embossed documents arranged across a table. "You knew that symbol," Caleb said. Adrian turned toward his footsteps. "I recognize part of it." "That sounds deliberately vague." "It is deliberately accurate." Caleb sat across from him. "Everyone else thinks I somehow damaged the ceremonial stone. Everyone else spent years calling you powerless. Admitting they misunderstood something would be inconvenient." Caleb looked at the documents. Raised symbols had been pressed into the paper so Adrian could trace them with his fingertips. "What are these?" "Copies of royal seals from the oldest palace records." Adrian moved one sheet toward him. "The symbol from the stone resembles this." Caleb studied the faded design. It showed a broken crown above a silver wolf. "What does it mean?" "Nobody knows anymore. The associated records disappeared almost 3 centuries ago." Caleb leaned back. "So an extinct royal symbol appeared after I failed an alpha test. Somehow that feels worse than simply being trash." Adrian's expression tightened. "Do not call yourself that." Caleb blinked. "Everyone else does." "Then let them be wrong without helping them." The words landed harder than Caleb expected. Adrian reached for another document. "The ceremonial stone measures alpha resonance by detecting pressure against its own energy. Most alphas naturally push outward. Stronger pressure creates brighter light. And I create nothing." "No, you create stillness." Adrian tapped the table once. "Yesterday, I listened to 17 candidates activate that stone. Each produced a different vibration. When you touched it, every vibration disappeared." Caleb frowned. "How could you know that?" "Because I listen." Adrian said it without defensiveness. "People often assume blindness means absence. It does not. I notice footsteps, breathing patterns, echoes, changes in air movement, the position of voices, and vibrations traveling through floors and furniture. None of that makes me supernatural. It simply means I learn to gather information differently." Caleb considered this. "So you were saying everyone who could see the stone missed something you noticed without seeing it?" Adrian smiled. "I would phrase it more diplomatically at dinner." Caleb laughed before he could stop himself. It was the first time he had laughed since the ceremony. Adrian's smile deepened at the sound. "There. That is useful evidence too." "Evidence of what?" "That you are less miserable when nobody is evaluating you." Caleb grew quiet. Nobody had ever described him so accurately after knowing him for less than a day. "Why are you doing this?" he asked. "You barely know me." "Because I know what it is like when people confuse limitation with worth." Adrian's fingers rested calmly on the embossed seal. "Some people enter a room and decide what I cannot do before I speak. They did the same thing to you yesterday." Caleb looked away. "There is a difference. You have status, intelligence, a place here, and you believe you have none of those because people repeated it often enough." Caleb had no answer. Adrian pushed the seal toward him. "Help me investigate the symbol." "Why me?" "Because it appeared for you." "That seems suspiciously obvious." "Good. You are learning." Caleb smiled again. Over the next hour, Adrian explained the fragments he had collected from old palace inventories. The missing crown symbol appeared beside references to something called the Quiet Line, but every detailed record had been removed from the modern archive. Caleb noticed that the removal dates followed a pattern. "These were not lost randomly," he said. "Every record disappeared during the same royal reform." Adrian became still. "Are you certain?" Caleb arranged the dates chronologically. "Within 12 years. Someone cleaned the history deliberately." Adrian reached across the table, stopping before Caleb's hand. "May I check something?" Caleb answered immediately. "Yes." Adrian placed 2 fingers against his wrist, exactly as he had during the ceremony. This time Caleb noticed the warmth of the contact, but Adrian's attention remained entirely on the pulse beneath his fingertips. "There it is again," Adrian whispered. "What?" "Stillness." At that exact moment, every wind chime hanging along the garden walkway stopped moving despite the afternoon breeze. Adrian lifted his head. Caleb stared around them. Then, beneath his sleeve, a mark he had carried since childhood began glowing silver for the first time in his life. Caleb slowly pulled back the fabric. A broken crown above a silver wolf shone against his skin. Adrian could not see it, but he heard Caleb's breathing change. "What happened?" Caleb looked from the mark to the ancient seal on the table. "I think the symbol did not appear because I touched the stone." His voice lowered. "I think it appeared because it recognized me." Caleb slept badly that night. although sleep was generous enough to visit him between long stretches of staring at the mark on his wrist. By morning, the silver glow had disappeared, leaving the same pale shape he had carried since childhood. He had always assumed it was an ordinary birthmark. Now he knew it matched a royal symbol someone had deliberately removed from history. Adrian sent word before breakfast asking Caleb to meet him in the Hall of Resonance, where the palace kept sacred relics used during official ceremonies. Caleb arrived to find Adrian standing beside a circular silver table while 3 royal scholars prepared an ancient crystal relic. "This seems unnecessarily public," Caleb said. Adrian turned toward his voice. "I requested witnesses." "Why?" "Because if something happens, I do not want anyone claiming afterward that we invented it." Caleb smiled despite his nerves. "You really do think like a scholar." That sounded dangerously close to admiration. "Do not become unreasonable." Adrian's quiet laugh followed Caleb toward the table. The oldest scholar explained that the crystal had once been used to measure alpha resonance, but no one had successfully activated it for nearly a century. Caleb placed his palm above it. Nothing happened. A familiar murmur moved through the observers. Caleb almost withdrew his hand until Adrian said, "Wait." He approached the table, listening carefully. "There is vibration beneath the floor." One scholar frowned. "I hear nothing." "You are listening for sound." "I am listening for interruption." Adrian tapped his cane lightly against the stone floor. A soft echo traveled through the chamber. "Caleb, move your hand 3 inches to the left." Caleb obeyed. The crystal remained dark, but the room became strangely quiet. Even the low magical hum from the surrounding relics faded. Adrian's expression sharpened. Again, 2 inches forward. Caleb moved. A thin silver line appeared inside the crystal. The scholars stopped whispering. "It is responding," one said. "No," Adrian replied. "It is aligning." Caleb felt no surge of strength, no overwhelming alpha instinct, only a deep calm spreading through the chamber. The crystal opened like a flower, revealing ancient symbols beneath its surface. Caleb recognized the broken crown and silver wolf. Then the floor trembled softly. One of the scholars stepped backward in alarm and accidentally disturbed a second relic on a nearby pedestal. Its energy flared unevenly, filling the chamber with a harsh pressure that made several people freeze. Caleb did not know how he understood what was happening. He simply noticed the pattern. "Do not fight it," he said. "Everyone step away from the pedestal." Adrian remained calm. "What do you need?" "Your cane." Adrian handed it over without hesitation. Caleb used the metal tip to tap 3 points around the circular base, following the same rhythm Adrian had demonstrated in the garden. The pressure weakened. "Again," Adrian said. "The third interval is longer." Caleb adjusted the rhythm. The relic settled completely. Nobody spoke. Caleb returned Adrian's cane. "You heard that?" "I heard what changed." Adrian reached toward Caleb, then paused. "May I?" Caleb knew what he meant. "Yes." Adrian's fingers touched his wrist. The instant they made contact, the silver birthmark beneath Caleb's sleeve became warm. Adrian inhaled sharply. "Your resonance changed." "Is that bad?" "No. It feels clearer." Silver light appeared beneath Adrian's fingertips and moved around Caleb's wrist in a narrow circle. Caleb stared as a second pattern formed across Adrian's hand, answering his own mark like 2 pieces of the same forgotten language. The scholars reacted immediately. One whispered, "A recognition mark." Another corrected him in disbelief. "That is a mate mark." Caleb's heart stumbled. Adrian slowly removed his hand, but the silver-gold pattern remained. The room erupted into shocked whispers. Caleb looked at Adrian, expecting embarrassment or fear. Instead, Adrian lifted his chin. "Nobody will interpret this for us." The eldest scholar stared at him. "Consort veil. Sacred marks have always indicated a destined bond." "Sacred marks indicate resonance," Adrian replied. "Tradition supplies the rest of that sentence." Caleb could barely process what had happened, yet Adrian's distinction steadied him. "So this does not mean I belong to you." Adrian's expression softened. "You belong to yourself." The answer silenced something inside Caleb that years of ridicule had never managed to reach. Then the ancient crystal behind them illuminated completely. Words appeared beneath the broken crown symbol. One scholar began translating, then stopped. "That cannot be correct." Caleb turned. "What does it say?" Adrian listened as the scholar read the ancient phrase aloud. Caleb did not understand the language, but Adrian clearly recognized part of it. His face became serious. It says the quiet crown has recognized its blood. The scholar continued, voice trembling with disbelief. And the one they named worthless shall return what was lost. Every gaze in the room shifted toward Caleb. For years, those eyes had looked at him and seen failure. Now they looked at him with uncertainty, curiosity, and sudden caution. Caleb studied the glowing words and felt none of the triumph he once imagined recognition might bring. He only had another question. What exactly was lost? Adrian turned toward the crystal. I think that is what someone erased from history. By sunset, the palace had developed at least 12 different explanations for Caleb's mark, and according to the servants, 3 of them involved secret royal marriages that had supposedly happened before he was born. Caleb decided gossip possessed more imagination than scholarship. He met Adrian in the oldest section of the royal archive, where the air smelled of cedar shelves and aging paper. The silver-gold mark on Caleb's wrist had faded to a pale outline, but it had not disappeared. Adrian's matching pattern remained across his hand. Neither of them mentioned it immediately. I found something, Adrian said, running his fingertips across an embossed catalog. That sentence is becoming dangerous. You still came. Apparently, I make questionable decisions around intelligent Omegas. Adrian smiled. Careful. Someone might mistake that for affection. Caleb felt warmth rise to his face and became grateful Adrian could not see it. What did you find? Adrian turned serious. The royal reform they had identified earlier had removed more than records. Entire family branches had been reassigned, renamed, or reduced to footnotes. One vanished branch appeared repeatedly beside the broken crown and silver wolf. The quiet crown, Caleb said. Yes, but that was not a throne. Adrian pushed a transcription toward him. It was a royal office independent of succession. Its members were called heirs beyond the crown. Caleb remembered the crystal's words. The quiet crown has recognized its blood. Exactly. They followed references through 6 damaged inventories until Caleb noticed an inconsistency. Every modern record described the quiet crown as ceremonial, yet older financial ledgers showed it maintaining scholars, mediators, and sanctuaries across the kingdom. That is a large budget for a decorative title, Caleb said. Adrian nodded, which means someone minimized its importance after removing it. A final ledger contained directions to a sealed records room beneath the archive. The entrance stood behind a stone wall less than 50 feet away. Caleb expected royal magic to require some dramatic display of alpha force. Instead, the door contained a shallow impression shaped exactly like the mark on his wrist. He placed his hand against it. Nothing happened. Caleb sighed. Of course. Adrian approached. What changed? Nothing. Then stop trying to make something happen. Caleb looked at him. That is your advice? You have spent your entire life being told alpha power means pushing harder. Every relic connected to you responds when you stop pushing. Caleb slowly relaxed his hand. The familiar stillness spread through him. A soft silver line traveled around the door. Ancient mechanisms shifted, and the wall opened without a sound. Caleb stared at Adrian. You are becoming annoyingly good at understanding me. I consider that a professional achievement. Inside, a narrow chamber held only one stone pedestal and a sealed tablet. The broken crown symbol covered its surface. Caleb approached, and the mark beneath his sleeve warmed. Words appeared across the tablet in modern script, as though the relic wanted to be understood. The first line read, The heir beyond the crown shall carry strength without dominion. Caleb read it twice. Strength without dominion. Adrian repeated the phrase thoughtfully. More words emerged. The quiet crown was created to protect the kingdom whenever royal authority became coercive. Its heirs possessed a sacred resonance capable of quieting supernatural pressure without controlling the person producing it. Caleb remembered the ceremonial stone, the unstable relic, and every alpha test he had ever failed. Those tests measured how strongly an alpha imposed resonance outward. Caleb's power did the opposite. They called me hollow because I could not dominate the stone, he said. Adrian faced him. Perhaps the stone was never the problem. Caleb gave a quiet laugh, but emotion tightened his throat. For years he had wondered what was missing inside him. The answer might be nothing. The tablet illuminated again, revealing a genealogy. Most names had faded, But the final branch ended with a symbol connected to Caleb's childhood records. Adrian listened while Caleb read the dates aloud. Your arrival at the palace was recorded without parents, Adrian said. Who brought you here? A monastery. Courier. I was told my family died when I was an infant. Was there anything with you? Caleb thought carefully. A silver pendant. He reached beneath his collar and removed the small piece he had worn since childhood. Adrian held out his palm, and Caleb placed it there. His fingers traced the shape. Broken crown. Silver wolf. Adrian became very still. Caleb, this is not merely a family crest. What is it? According to the oldest catalog, only one person in each generation carried this pendant. Caleb waited. Adrian's voice softened. The lost prince. The words should have felt triumphant. Instead, Caleb thought of every person who had called him trash and realized a royal title would make them change their minds for entirely the wrong reason. If this is true, he said, I was not worthless yesterday. Adrian turned toward him immediately. No, and I am not valuable today because someone found a title. No. Caleb looked at the man who had understood that before any relic confirmed it. You believed me before the evidence was complete. Adrian shook his head gently. I believed the evidence before everyone else was willing to examine it. The distinction made Caleb smile. Then the tablet produced one final line. Adrian heard the mechanism and reached toward the pedestal. His marked hand began glowing silver gold. Caleb's wrist answered. New words appeared beneath the lost prince genealogy. Caleb read them aloud. When the forgotten heir returns, the witness shall recognize him before the kingdom remembers his name. Adrian's expression changed. The witness. Caleb looked at the matching marks between them. I think this mystery just became about both of us. The word witness followed Caleb into the next morning, but Adrian seemed far less interested in ancient titles than in the practical question of what the records could actually prove. They returned to the hidden archive shortly after sunrise and spent hours comparing the lost prince genealogy with surviving court documents. Caleb expected another dramatic revelation. Instead, Adrian found the first useful clue in a tax ledger. The Quiet Crown funded 3 schools, 2 mediation houses, and something called the Sanctuary of Still Light, Adrian said. Caleb leaned over the table. That does not sound like an organization built around royal privilege. It sounds like one built around public service. Caleb smiled faintly. You sound disappointed that my mysterious ancestors were responsible administrators. Devastated. I was hoping for secret tunnels. We already found a hidden room. My standards are rising. Their laughter faded when Caleb uncovered a damaged document describing the sacred power carried by the lost prince line. The still light did not strengthen alpha dominance. It quieted coercive resonance, allowing people affected by supernatural pressure to recover their own judgment. Caleb read the passage twice. So every test that called me weak was measuring the exact thing my power refuses to do. Adrian nodded. They measured how effectively you could impose yourself on something else. Caleb sat back slowly, and everyone decided that was the definition of strength. Definitions become dangerous when nobody remembers who created them. Caleb looked toward Adrian. You really believe that? I have lived it. Adrian's voice remained calm, but something underneath it changed. Caleb waited rather than filling the silence. After a moment, Adrian continued. When I lost my sight as a child, people began speaking around me as though blindness had also removed my ability to decide. They chose where I should sit, what I should study, which corridors were too difficult, which duties were supposedly inappropriate for an Omega who could not see. Caleb felt anger rise, but Adrian did not need anger on his behalf. He needed to be heard. What did you do? I learned the palace better than they did. A small smile touched Adrian's face. I memorized distances, echoes, floor textures, door hinges, voices, scents, and the number of steps between every important room. Eventually people stopped telling me where I could go because I kept arriving before them. Caleb laughed softly. That sounds like you. Adrian tilted his head. You have known me for 4 days. Apparently 4 days were enough. Silence settled between them, warmer than before. Caleb noticed Adrian's hand resting near an unopened document. He could have moved it closer without asking, but instead he said, May I guide your hand to the seal? Adrian's expression softened. Yes. Caleb gently moved Adrian's fingers toward the embossed symbol, then released him immediately. Adrian traced it himself. Broken crown. Silver wolf. Exactly. You always ask. Caleb frowned. Ask what? Before helping me. Adrian's fingers remained on the seal. Most people assume assistance is automatically kindness. Sometimes it is simply another way of deciding for someone. Caleb considered that. Then I will keep asking. Adrian turned toward him. That is one reason I trust you. The word struck Caleb with more force than any alpha test ever had. He had spent years wanting respect from rooms full of people who had already judged him. Somehow, trust from one man mattered more. Before Caleb could answer, Adrian found a hidden ridge beneath the seal. The document unfolded into a second layer. Raised lettering appeared beneath his fingertips while Caleb read the visible text. It described the witness consorts, Omega scholars trained to identify the still light, because ordinary royal instruments often mistook its absence of domination for weakness. Your ancestors recognized mine, Caleb said. Adrian shook his head. Possibly. We still need evidence connecting my family to them. Caleb smiled. There is the scholar again. You sound surprised. No. I think I like him. Adrian became very quiet. Caleb realized what he had said and decided, for once, not to retreat from it. Adrian's smile returned slowly. Good. I was beginning to think the mark had better judgment than you. Caleb laughed, and the silver-gold pattern on his wrist warmed. Adrian's matching mark answered, but neither man treated it as a command. They returned to the records and eventually found a map showing the sanctuary of still light beneath an abandoned royal chapel outside the capital. Beside it was a warning written by the final recognized lost prince. Caleb read aloud. The still light is sacred because it cannot make another soul kneel. If our descendants ever call domination strength, they will call the purest alpha powerless. Adrian became motionless. Caleb understood why. The sentence did more than explain his life. It accused the entire modern system of forgetting what strength had once meant. Beneath the warning appeared another line. When the lost prince returns, let the witness stand beside him, not behind him. Caleb looked at Adrian. Adrian smiled faintly. That part one approve of. Caleb reached toward him, then stopped. May I? Adrian extended his hand. Yes. Caleb took it gently. There was no magical revelation this time. Only warmth, trust, and a choice freely returned. Then Adrian's fingers brushed a final embossed symbol on the map. His expression changed. Caleb, there is another inscription. Caleb leaned closer and read the newly revealed words. The sanctuary preserves the covenant of equal bonds. Adrian turned toward him. What is that? Caleb studied the ancient map. I think we are going to find out why someone wanted the lost prince forgotten. The abandoned royal chapel stood 12 miles beyond the capital, hidden behind a line of old cedar trees that had grown so closely together the road seemed to disappear between them. Caleb and Adrian arrived shortly after noon with copies of the recovered records and permission from the royal archivist to inspect the ruins. Caleb expected the sanctuary of still light to be buried beneath collapsed stone. Instead, Adrian stopped near the center of the chapel and tapped his cane against the floor. There is an empty space beneath us, he said. Caleb examined the worn tiles until he found a broken crown carved into one corner. I have the symbol. Do not push. I remember. Caleb placed his palm over the carving and allowed himself to become still. Silver light moved through the cracks between the tiles, tracing a circle nearly 6 feet across. A section of floor shifted aside, revealing a narrow staircase. Caleb looked toward Adrian. May I guide you? Until we reach the railing. Caleb offered his arm. Adrian accepted it, and together they descended into cool air carrying the scent of cedar and old stone. At the bottom, Adrian released Caleb's arm as soon as his hand found the railing. The sanctuary beyond was astonishingly intact. Caleb described the chamber aloud as they walked. Silver pillars, carved wolves, hundreds of names covering the walls, and a circular altar beneath an image of 2 open hands supporting a crown without touching it. No throne? Adrian asked. Not one. That seems important. At the altar, Caleb found an inscription. Power becomes sacred only when another soul remains free beside it. Adrian repeated the words quietly. Caleb felt the still light awaken, not as force, but as a deep calm spreading through the room. Hidden lettering emerged across the walls. The sanctuary had not been built to glorify the lost prince. It had been created to limit royal power. Generations of quiet crown heirs had served as mediators whenever alpha resonance was used to influence judgment, loyalty, or political agreement. Their gift could neutralize coercive pressure long enough for people to make decisions freely. Caleb stared at the records. That is why the royal tests never recognized me. They were designed to measure projection, Adrian said. Your gift protects against projection. Caleb laughed once, without humor. I spent 25 years believing I was a failed version of an alpha because nobody remembered there was another kind. Adrian turned toward his voice. Then perhaps the failure belongs to the definition, not the person. They continued until they reached a sealed silver cabinet. Caleb's pendant opened it. Inside rested the final journal of the last publicly recognized lost prince. The entries described growing political pressure to redefine alpha authority as natural dominance. The quiet crown opposed that doctrine, arguing that leadership without consent was merely control wearing ceremonial clothing. Caleb read faster as the pattern became clear. The Lost Prince line had not disappeared because it lacked heirs. Its identity had been deliberately removed from public records after refusing to endorse the new doctrine. My family was erased because they would not call domination sacred, Caleb said. Adrian's expression hardened. And centuries later, you were called worthless because you could not dominate. The irony settled heavily between them. Caleb turned another page. There, written in careful script, was the name of the power he carried, the still light. It was described as pure because it could not command another person's will, and sacred because its purpose was restoration rather than obedience. Caleb touched the words. For the first time, he understood that his lack of commanding resonance had never been an absence. It had been restraint built into the gift itself. Adrian moved closer. What are you thinking? That I wanted them to be wrong about me for years. Caleb swallowed. Now I have proof, and I do not feel victorious. Because proving your worth was never supposed to be your life's work. Caleb looked at him. Adrian continued. You were worthy before we opened this sanctuary. Caleb smiled faintly. You keep saying things I need to hear before I know I need them. Another professional achievement. Caleb laughed, and the tension eased. Then he noticed another chamber beyond the journal cabinet. Its doorway carried the same silver-gold pattern as their marks. There is something else. Adrian approached, but the doorway did not respond to Caleb alone. May I take your hand? Caleb asked. Adrian extended it. Yes. Their fingers joined, and both marks warmed. The door opened. Beyond it stood a wall covered with paired names, some Alpha and Omega, some Beta and Alpha, and many pairs identified simply as two male Alpha guardians. Above them was a single phrase, Covenant of Equal Bonds. Adrian listened as Caleb read the records. Ancient law had once recognized partnerships according to consent and mutual responsibility rather than gender or secondary designation. Among the most honored examples were accounts of male alpha romance between guardians who had chosen partnership without dominance, proving that strength did not require hierarchy even between two powerful alphas. This changes more than your family history, Adrian said. It changes what the kingdom believes about itself. Caleb nodded. Then he found a later inscription where entire sections had been deliberately removed. Only one warning survived. If they erase the bonds, they will next erase the guardian. If they erase the guardian, they will redefine strength. Adrian became silent. Caleb suddenly understood the sequence. First, the kingdom had rewritten which relationships were considered legitimate. Then it had erased the lost prince who protected free choice. Finally, it had transformed alpha strength from protection into dominance. At the bottom of the wall, a final silver line appeared beneath Caleb's hand. He read the newly revealed message slowly. To restore the truth, seek the witness who was taught to see without sight. Caleb turned toward Adrian. Adrian's marked hand began to glow. That sounds remarkably specific, he said. Caleb stared at the light spreading across the ancient wall. Adrian, I do not think your blindness prevented you from becoming the witness. His voice softened as another hidden symbol appeared beneath Adrian's fingertips. I think your family spent generations preparing someone to recognize truth without depending on what everyone else could see. Adrian did not answer immediately. His fingers remained against the newly revealed symbol while Caleb watched silver-gold light spread through the carved lines of the sanctuary wall. For several seconds, the chamber seemed to hold its breath. Then Adrian said, "My family never told me anything about witness consorts." Caleb studied the inscription. Maybe they did not know. Or maybe they knew enough to be afraid of remembering. That possibility followed them deeper into the chamber, where another set of records waited behind a narrow stone panel. Adrian traced the raised lettering while Caleb read the visible script aloud. The documents described generations of witness consorts, Omega scholars who studied law, history, sacred resonance, and methods for identifying coercive magic. They had never existed to serve the lost prince. They had existed to verify him independently. That explains the wording, Adrian said. The witness stands beside the heir, not behind him. Caleb smiled. You really like that part. I still do. The next record changed Adrian's expression. Caleb read the Vale family name at the bottom of a genealogy extending nearly 300 years. Adrian slowly lowered his hand. So it is true. Your family descends from the witness line. That does not mean I automatically become one. Caleb looked at him. You recognize my resonance before anyone understood it. Observation is not destiny. No. Caleb stepped closer. It is evidence. Adrian laughed softly. You have been spending too much time with me. I have noticed. The warmth between them lasted until they reached the oldest covenant records. Caleb expected laws concerning Alpha and Omega bonds. Instead, he found dozens of partnerships that modern history had never mentioned. Some joined Alpha Guardians with Omega scholars. Others recorded Beta mediators with Alpha protectors. Several honored two male Alpha Guardians whose romantic partnerships had been recognized as sacred bonds. The records called these relationships examples of strength without hierarchy. Neither partner surrendered identity, authority, or freedom. Their bond mattered because both chose it. Male alpha romance was not merely tolerated, Caleb said. Some of these couples were honored by the crown. Adrian tilted his head. And modern histories say such partnerships were never part of royal tradition. Caleb examined the dates. The references disappeared during the same reform that erased the quiet crown. Adrian became quiet. Then the lost prince was not the first thing they erased. Caleb understood. They erased the bonds first. Because those bonds contradicted the doctrine they wanted to create. The conclusion was uncomfortable but clear. A political system built around rigid hierarchy needed history to look as though hierarchy had always been natural. Relationships based on equality complicated that story. A royal guardian whose sacred power prevented coercion complicated it even more. Caleb stared at the wall of names. They changed the past until the present looked inevitable. Adrian nodded. That is how a useful story becomes a dangerous one. Another inscription appeared beneath their marks. Caleb read it carefully. The witness shall recognize the heir, but recognition grants no ownership. The heir shall protect the witness, but protection grants no authority over him. Adrian smiled. Ancient people were surprisingly specific. Apparently they understood us. They did not know us. Caleb looked at their joined marks. Exactly. Adrian turned toward him. Caleb continued. Whatever this mark means historically, it cannot tell me how I feel about you. Silence followed. And how do you feel? Adrian asked. Caleb could have blamed the relics, bloodlines, or destiny. Instead, he chose the simplest truth. I trust you. I admire you. I look forward to hearing your voice before I enter a room. And when something strange happens, you are the first person I want beside me. Adrian's expression softened. That sounds inconvenient. Extremely. Good. Caleb laughed. Good. Adrian extended his hand. Because I feel something equally inconvenient. Caleb took it gently. No door opened. No prophecy appeared. Their marks did not command them to move closer. For once, magic remained silent, leaving the choice entirely theirs. Adrian squeezed Caleb's hand once. I do not want a sacred mark making decisions for me. Neither do I. Then we agree. About the mark? About choosing slowly. Caleb smiled. I can do slowly. A low chime interrupted them. Silver light moved across the final wall, revealing a hidden map of the royal capital. One location glowed beneath the palace itself. Caleb read the accompanying inscription. The First Witness Archive. Adrian's expression sharpened. There is another archive? Apparently beneath the royal council chamber. Caleb followed the inscription downward and felt his stomach tighten. There is more. Read it. Caleb hesitated. The final testimony shall reveal why the lost prince was erased. And who ordered the first rewriting? Adrian turned toward him. Then we have our next piece of evidence. Caleb stared at the glowing map. The truth was no longer buried in an abandoned sanctuary. It was hidden directly beneath the people who governed the kingdom. And if the final testimony survived, they were about to discover whether the history everyone accepted had been distorted by accident, fear, or deliberate choice. The first witness archive had been hidden beneath the royal council chamber for so long that even the palace maps showed nothing below the foundation except stone. Caleb and Adrian entered after midnight with written authorization from the royal archivist and 2 neutral scholars as witnesses. The map from the sanctuary led them to a narrow corridor behind the council library, where Adrian stopped beside an ordinary wall. "There is space behind this," he said. Caleb examined the stone until he found 2 nearly invisible symbols, the broken crown and an open hand. Lost prince and witness. Adrian approached. "Then perhaps it requires both." Caleb placed his marked wrist against the crown while Adrian rested his marked hand over the second symbol. Silver gold light moved between them, and the wall opened. Inside stood shelves of sealed testimony untouched by time. Caleb expected another genealogy. Instead, the first document contained a confession from a royal counselor who had lived nearly 3 centuries earlier. He read aloud while Adrian listened. The rewriting had begun during a period of political instability. Several powerful families wanted a simpler social order built around unquestioned alpha authority. The covenant of equal bonds complicated that doctrine because it preserved examples of Omega scholars holding independent authority, beta mediators challenging royal decisions, and male alpha romance founded on partnership rather than hierarchy. The quiet crown presented an even greater obstacle because the still light could neutralize coercive resonance. They could not claim domination was sacred while a royal bloodline existed specifically to protect people from it, Caleb said. Adrian's expression tightened. So they changed the definition of strength. The testimony confirmed it. Records were gradually removed, terminology altered, and the lost prince line publicly declared extinct. Surviving heirs were relocated under different family names. Witness families were separated from them, so recognition could not easily occur again. Caleb stared at the document. They did not defeat my family. They made people forget why it mattered. Adrian nodded. Which is sometimes more effective. Another record revealed something neither expected. The ancient recognition mark between lost prince and witness had never been defined as a compulsory mate bond. It indicated compatible sacred resonance and mutual capacity to restore the archive. Later historians had incorrectly merged recognition marks with romantic mate traditions. Caleb looked at the silver gold pattern on Adrian's hand. So the mark never said we were destined to love each other. No. Adrian sounded almost amused. Are you disappointed? Caleb considered the question. Actually, I am relieved. That was not the romantic answer I expected. Caleb smiled. Then let me improve it. I am relieved because whatever I feel for you belongs to me, not to an ancient relic. Adrian became very still. Caleb continued. The mark introduced a possibility. You gave me reasons to stay. Adrian reached toward him, stopping halfway. May I? Caleb placed his hand in Adrian's. Yes. Adrian's fingers closed gently around his. Then I am staying too. No light appeared. Nothing magical happened. Caleb thought that made the moment more meaningful. The final testimony waited inside a silver case. It had been written by the last publicly recognized lost prince. Caleb opened it and found no demand for revenge, no command to reclaim a throne, and no prophecy promising royal power. The message asked future descendants to restore the records publicly, allow independent scholars to verify them, and refuse any attempt to replace one rigid hierarchy with another. He knew someone might use the truth as another weapon, Caleb said. Then he understood power better than the people who erased him, Adrian replied. By morning, the evidence was presented before the royal council. Some members questioned its authenticity. Others demanded months of examination. Caleb welcomed both responses. Do not believe me because of my blood, he told them. Examine the documents. Compare the dates. Test the relics. Truth should survive questions. Then one counselor turned toward Adrian. And the mark? Does it establish the lost prince as your sacred mate? Adrian stood calmly beside Caleb. It establishes recognition. Nothing more. Yet you remain beside him. Adrian smiled. That is my decision. Caleb felt something inside him settle. Another counselor asked whether Caleb intended to claim royal authority as the lost prince. Caleb looked around the chamber where generations had once decided what people like him were worth. No. If my ancestors existed to prevent power from becoming coercion, using their name to seize power would betray them. Silence filled the room. Caleb continued. Restore the records. Restore the erased names. Restore the covenant of equal bonds. Then let people decide what those truths mean for the kingdom. Adrian's hand found his. This time Caleb did not need to ask, because Adrian was the one reaching first. As their fingers joined, the ancient ceremonial stone across the council chamber illuminated on its own. The broken crown appeared, followed by words no modern scholar had seen before. Caleb read them slowly. The lost prince is not the man who inherits a forgotten throne. He is the man who remembers that no throne owns a soul. Adrian smiled. Caleb looked at him and finally understood the deepest reversal of all. Adrian had never marked a worthless man and transformed him into someone valuable. He had recognized someone who had possessed value long before the kingdom remembered how to see it. 3 years later, nobody in the royal capital called Caleb Rowan a hollow alpha anymore. Although Caleb sometimes suspected that silence had less to do with enlightenment and more to do with embarrassment. The kingdom had changed slowly, exactly as he believed meaningful change should. Independent scholars verified the first witness archive. Historians restored the quiet crown to official records. The names removed during the royal reform were returned to public archives, including Omega scholars, Beta mediators, and the male Alpha guardians whose partnerships had once represented strength without hierarchy. The covenant of equal bonds became part of university history courses again, not as a command for how anyone should live, but as evidence that the kingdom had never possessed only one definition of love, loyalty, or family. Caleb refused every proposal to create a new royal position for him. Instead, the restored sanctuary of still light became an independent institution where scholars studied coercive resonance, historical manipulation, and the ethical use of sacred power. Adrian served on its governing council by choice. Although he rejected every suggestion that the building should be redesigned without consulting him first. Someone moved a chair again, Adrian said one spring morning as Caleb entered the sanctuary library. Caleb stopped. How do you know? Because my knee discovered it before breakfast. Should I move it? Adrian lifted one eyebrow. Caleb corrected himself. Would you like me to move it? Adrian smiled. You are still learning. Apparently, I am a slow student. No, you are an alpha. Expectations must remain realistic. Caleb laughed and crossed the room. Their silver-gold recognition marks had never disappeared, but neither man treated them as proof of ownership or destiny. Their relationship had grown through hundreds of ordinary choices, shared breakfasts, difficult disagreements, long evenings over ancient documents, quiet walks through the Eastern Garden, and the simple habit of asking rather than assuming. Months after the council hearing, Caleb had asked Adrian whether he wanted their partnership to become romantic. Adrian had answered yes, then reminded him that agreement was not permission to become unbearable. Caleb had considered that unfairly specific. Now Adrian reached across the table, found Caleb's hand, and linked their fingers. The gesture remained meaningful precisely because no magic required it. Outside the library, a group of students entered for their first lesson on the Lost Prince. One young alpha lingered near the doorway after the others left. Lord Rowan, he said nervously. May I ask something? Caleb nodded. Of course. Is it true people used to call you trash? Adrian became suspiciously interested in the papers before him. Caleb sighed. History has preserved that detail with unnecessary enthusiasm. The student looked embarrassed. I only wondered how you became strong enough to prove them wrong. Caleb considered the question. Years earlier, he might have answered, by mentioning the still light, the lost prince bloodline, or the sacred relics that finally recognized him. None of those answers felt true anymore. I did not become valuable when they discovered my blood, Caleb said. I was valuable before they learned how to recognize it. The student frowned thoughtfully. Then what changed? Their understanding. Caleb glanced toward Adrian. Mine too. After the student left, Adrian smiled. That was almost wise. Almost. I refused to damage your character by praising you excessively. Caleb sat beside him. Through the open windows came the sound of students crossing the sanctuary courtyard. Some were Alpha, some Omega, some Beta. Several were studying the restored histories of sacred bonds. Others were learning how the still light worked, although Caleb insisted every lesson begin with its most important limitation. It could remove supernatural pressure, but it could never decide what another person should think afterward. That limitation was the reason Caleb considered the power sacred. Freedom was not valuable because it guaranteed the correct choice. Freedom mattered because the choice remained yours. Adrian turned toward the window. Do you ever wish you had taken the royal position? No, not even occasionally. I already have everything I wanted. Adrian smiled. That sounded dangerously romantic. I have been practicing. Clearly, Caleb looked at the man who had recognized him when recognition offered no advantage. Before royal blood, before ancient archives, before anyone had reason to reconsider the worthless Alpha they thought they knew. There is one thing I still wonder about, Caleb said. What? If you had known from the beginning that I was the lost prince, would anything have been different? Adrian considered the question. Yes. Caleb blinked. Really? I would have made you carry more archive boxes. Caleb laughed so loudly that several students outside turned toward the window. Adrian squeezed his hand. The recognition mark warmed gently between them, but Caleb no longer needed its light to understand what connected them. History had called him worthless. Tradition had mistaken Adrian's blindness for limitation. Ancient records had been rewritten until domination looked like strength and equality looked unnatural. In the end, neither a crown nor a sacred mark corrected those lies by itself. Two men had questioned them, evidence had exposed them, and people had chosen to build something better from the truth. Caleb had once believed the greatest miracle of his life was discovering that he was the lost prince. Years later, he understood that the greater gift was simpler. Someone had seen his worth before knowing his title, and when the truth finally gave them both a choice, they had chosen each other.